Hello everyone, and welcome to Soft Stories. I'm Stratton, and today we are continuing our reading of How to Live on 24 Hours a Day by Arnold Bennett. We started this little book last time, on which I just noticed that the author's signature is embossed on the cover, a detail that I really like. I'm coming to love this little book as we dive deeper into it. It's a little self-help book, not about how to develop skills or make more money, but how best to make use of the 24 hours that every person has in a day. Now, it seems that this book is definitely targeted towards a specific audience, people who are not necessarily wanting for money in their lives, and so obviously it's coming from a position of some privilege. But it's still an interesting look back into the past and into our understanding of what makes life important and what made life important back when this book was first published in 1910. With that in mind, I'm quite looking forward to continuing, so let's dive right in. Here we are at Chapter 3, Precautions Before Beginning. Now that I have succeeded, if succeeded I have, in persuading you to admit to yourself that you are constantly haunted by a suppressed dissatisfaction with your own arrangement of your daily life, and that the primal cause of that inconvenient dissatisfaction is the feeling that you are, every day, leaving undone something which you would like to do, and which, indeed, you are always hoping to do when you have more time. And now that I have drawn your attention to the glaring, dazzling truth that you never will have more time, since you already have all the time there is, you expect me to let you into some wonderful secret by which you may at any rate approach the ideal of a perfect arrangement of the day, and by which, therefore, that haunting, unpleasant, daily disappointment of things left undone will be got rid of. I have found no such wonderful secret, nor do I expect to find it, nor do I expect that anyone else will ever find it. It is undiscovered. When you first began to gather my drift, perhaps there was a resurrection of hope in your breast. Perhaps you said to yourself, "This man will show me an easy, unfatiguing way of doing what I have so long in vain wished to do." Alas, no. The fact is that there is no easy way, no royal road. The path to Mecca is extremely hard and stony, and the worst of it is that you will never quite get there after all. The most important preliminary to the task of arranging one's life so that one may live fully and comfortably within one's daily budget of 24 hours is the calm realization of the extreme difficulty of the task, of the sacrifices and the endless effort which it demands. I cannot too strongly insist on this. If you imagine that you will be able to achieve your ideal by ingeniously planning out a timetable with a pen on a piece of paper, you had better give up hope at once. If you are not prepared for discouragements and disillusions, if you will not be content with a small result for a big effort, then do not begin. Lie down again, and resume the uneasy doze which you call your existence. It is very sad, is it not? Very depressing and sombre. And yet, I think it is rather fine, too, this necessity for the tense bracing of the will before anything worth doing can be done. I rather like it, myself. I feel it to be the chief thing that differentiates me from the cat by the fire. Well, you say, assume that I am braced for the battle. Assume that I have carefully weighed and comprehended your ponderous remarks. How do I begin? Dear sir, you simply begin. There is no magic method of beginning. If a man standing on the edge of a swimming bath and wanting to jump into the cold water should ask you, "How do I begin to jump?" you would merely reply, "Just jump. Take hold of your nerves and jump." As I have previously said, the chief beauty about the constant supply of time is that you cannot waste it in advance. The next year, the next day, the next hour are lying ready for you, as perfect, as unspoiled, as if you had never wasted or misapplied a single moment in all your career. Which fact is very gratifying and reassuring. You can turn over a new leaf every hour if you choose. Therefore no object is served in waiting till next week, or even until tomorrow. You may fancy that the water will be warmer next week. It won't. It will be colder. But before you begin, let me murmur a few words of warning in your private ear. Let me principally warn you against your own ardour. Ardour in well-doing is a misleading and a treacherous thing. It cries out loudly for employment. You can't satisfy it at first. It wants more and more. It is eager to move mountains and divert the course of rivers. It isn't content till it perspires. And then, too often, when it feels the perspiration on its brow, it wearies all of a sudden and dies, without even putting itself to the trouble of saying, "I've had enough of this." Beware of taking on too much at the start. Be content with quite a little. Allow for accidents. Allow for human nature, especially your own. A failure or so in itself would not matter if it did not incur a loss of self-esteem and of self-confidence. But just as nothing succeeds like success, so nothing fails like failure. Most people who are ruined by attempting too much. Therefore, in setting out on the immense enterprise of living fully and comfortably within the narrow limits of 24 hours a day, let us avoid, at any cost, the risk of an early failure. I will not agree that, in this business, at any rate, a glorious failure is better than a petty success. I am all for the petty success. A glorious failure leads to nothing. A petty success may lead to a success that is not petty. So, let us begin to examine the budget of the day's time. You say your day is already full to overflowing. How? You actually spend in earning your livelihood how much? 7 hours on the average? And in actual sleep? 7? I will add 2 hours and be generous, and I will defy you to account to me on the spur of the moment for the other 8 hours. Chapter 4. The Cause of the Trouble. In order to come to grips at once with the question of time expenditure in all its actuality, I must choose an individual case for examination. I can only deal with one case, and that case cannot be the average case, because there is no such case as the average case, just as there is no such man as the average man. Every man, and every man's case, is special. But if I take the case of a Londoner who works in an office, whose office hours are from 10 to 6, and who spends 50 minutes morning and night in travelling between his house door and his office door, I shall have got as near to the average as facts permit. There are men who have to work longer for a living, but there are others who do not have to work so long. Fortunately, the financial side of existence does not interest us here. For our present purpose, the clerk at £1 a week is exactly as well off as the millionaire in Carlton House Terrace. Now the great and profound mistake which my typical man makes in regard to his day is a mistake of general attitude, a mistake which vitiates and weakens 2/3 of his energies and interests. In the majority of instances, he does not precisely feel a passion for his business. At best, he does not dislike it. He begins his business functions with reluctance, as late as he can, and he ends them with joy, as early as he can. And his engines, while he is engaged in his business, are seldom at their full HP. I presume they mean horsepower and not hit points, as we might think of it today. Though I suppose both work, don't they? I know that I shall be accused by angry readers of traducing the city worker, but I am pretty thoroughly acquainted with the city, and I stick to what I say. Yet in spite of all this, he persists in looking upon those hours from 10 to 6 as the day, to which the 10 hours preceding them, and the 6 hours following them, are nothing but a prologue and epilogue. Such an attitude, unconscious as it may be, of course kills his interest in the odd 16 hours, with the result that, even if he does not waste them, he does not count them. He regards them simply as margin. This general attitude is utterly illogical and unhealthy, since it formally gives the central prominence to a patch of time and a bunch of activities which the man's one idea is to get through and have done with. If a man makes 2/3 of his existence subservient to 1/3, for which admittedly he has no absolutely feverish zest, how can he hope to live fully and completely? He cannot. If my typical man wishes to live fully and completely, he must, in his mind, arrange a day within a day. And this inner day, a Chinese box in a larger Chinese box, must begin at 6 p.m. and end at 10 a.m. It is a day of 16 hours, and during all these 16 hours he has nothing whatsoever to do but cultivate his body and his soul and his fellow men. During those 16 hours, he is free. He is not a wage earner. He is not preoccupied by monetary cares. He is just as good as a man with a private income. This must be his attitude. And his attitude is all important. His success in life, much more important than the amount of estate upon what his executors will have to pay estate duty, depends on it. What? You say that full energy given to those 16 hours will lessen the value of the business 8? Not so. On the contrary, it will assuredly increase the value of the business 8. One of the chief things which my typical man has to learn is that the mental faculties are capable of a continuous hard activity. They do not tire like an arm or a leg. All they want is change, not rest, except in sleep. I shall now examine the typical man's current method of employing the 16 hours that are entirely his, beginning with his uprising. I will merely indicate things which he does, and which I think he ought not to do, postponing my suggestions for planting the times which I shall have cleared, as a settler clears spaces in a forest. In justice to him, I must say that he wastes very little time before he leaves the house in the morning at 9:10. In too many houses he gets up at 9, breakfasts between 9.7 and 9.9½, and then bolts. But immediately he bangs the front door, his mental faculties, which are tireless, become idle. He walks to the station in a condition of mental coma. Arrived there, he usually has to wait for the train. On hundreds of suburban stations every morning, you see men calmly strolling up and down platforms, while railway companies unblushingly rob them of time, which is more than money. Hundreds of thousands of hours are thus lost every day, because my typical man thinks so little of time that it has never occurred to him to take quite easy precautions against the risk of its loss. He has a solid coin of time to spend every day. Call it a sovereign. He must get change for it, and in getting change he is content to lose heavily. Supposing that in selling him a ticket the company said, "We will change you a sovereign, but we shall charge you 3 halfpence for doing so." What would my typical man exclaim? Yet that is the equivalent of what the company does when it robs him of 5 minutes twice a day. You say that I am dealing with minutiae. I am. And later on I will justify myself. Now, will you kindly buy your paper and step onto the train? That is the end of chapter 4, and thus the end of our time together today. An interesting start with chapter 3 and its rather dour predictions after such lofty beginnings in the first 2 chapters. But I think the author's quite right. The way that we deal with the time between moments is very important. I look forward to hearing what he has to say next, and I hope you are enjoying it too. Until next we meet and continue learning how to live in 24 hours a day, I wish you all the best, and goodbye.